Shout out to thrift stores.
Yeah.
Yep. I got this new shirt that I like so much, and I will be wearing way too much, like I already have. And $4.
Yeah, you've been wearing that a lot.
And thank God there is no one here begging me to show my jeans.
Nobody is.
Because I would. Because I
It just
also
turns
got
into
those
a
too.
fashion show. You're just showing everything on the camera. That would be crazy.
I mean, that'd be a good little portion. I would love if people did that. Like they did that on Gold Hour. They got a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Just holding up and telling what the price is.
You know what's crazy is I just heard something on the podcast that I wanted to talk about and forgot. And that was 10 minutes ago.
And that was going to be your opening?
Yeah. Isn't that ridiculous?
I have to write things down because I will forget. I'll even do that where we're about to go on a walk. I'm like, save it for the walk. And then I'll forget.
Yeah.
I used to do that when we would drive to the beach for the morning walks. I'd be in the car. I'm like, ooh, okay. Well, there'll be something. And I'm like, but don't say it now because you'll waste it. Yeah. And I never remember what it is.
It's honestly ridiculous. You have so many thoughts a day, though, that it's like no wonder I don't remember it from 10 minutes ago.
This is something that I wanted to bring up because I was scrolling through Instagram and I thought about it. And this is not a new pet peeve, but it's something I pretty much 99% of the time, if you're doing this in a picture or to me, I will know. Or if I see you in the wild doing it, I will recognize it and go, interesting.
In the wild.
It's when people in pictures or when they're like standing next to you in a picture and they do this with their hand rather than full hand on you. Like if you see someone and it's like, I can't do it in reverse, but like when they're doing like this, like they'll touch you like with their knuckles.
Yeah.
I'm always like, that person doesn't have good, like that person has intimacy issues.
Insecure.
They're like, they have some sort of emotional funkiness going on.
Yeah.
I feel weird when people do. I'm like, oh man. Either
you feel sad for them.
Or like me, like, you can't give me a full palm.
Yeah, maybe they think you're gross.
But like when I see people do it, then I analyze them with other people and they do it with other people. Or like I see their pictures and you can see the claw.
Okay, Sherlock Holmes.
And I'm like, oh, interesting. I'm over here like
tickling him.
Like I will like rub your back.
Yeah, that's weird.
I would rather be that than
I used to be that.
Closed off.
I used to be knuckles.
You used to do this?
Yeah.
Ooh, why do you think? Is it like an emotional thing?
An emotional thing? What do you
like
mean?
That you can't open up to people? So you're physically closing yourself off?
No, it's more of a respect for that person. I don't know if they want my hands all over them.
Oh, see, I would rather hover then.
Yeah,
I would rather you
that.
not touch me than this.
Yeah. I get it.
I don't know. Maybe that's like a female thing. Like, I don't think I would. I don't know. Maybe I should think that way. It would be hard for me to think that I would be like superimposing myself on someone physically.
Oh, well. Yeah.
Maybe that's just a damaged part of me.
I mean, well, no, that's a giant discrepancy. Like, yeah, between the male and the female thing. Maybe that's some of it, of the imposing. Like, men are not typically worried about women.
Sure.
In that way. So maybe some of that. For me, it was always just like, I just don't want to be weird.
Sure.
I don't want them to like walk away and be like, oh my gosh, he like had his hands all over me.
Got it.
It's like, oh, wasn't trying to do anything.
Even though it just...
Wasn't trying to do anything, Grandma.
All it is.
Yeah. What else you got?
I have
stuff, but it's so random that
Well, say something random and I'll pull my notes up.
Building is a carpenter upstairs. Quickly while you look at this. So there was a guy in the NFL. He's retired now, but like 5 years ago, he took half of his salary and had it converted into Bitcoin. Isn't that kind of crazy?
Half his salary?
Yeah, half of one of his years worth of salary. So it was like a $13 million year or contract or whatever. He took $6.5 million and converted it to Bitcoin. That $6.5 million is now worth over like $25 million.
And it's not Gene Simmons who you're talking about?
It's not what?
Gene Simmons?
Was Gene Simmons a former NFL football player?
Oh! I didn't
You didn't hear that?
pick out that nugget.
Who's
of the
Gene
story.
Simmons?
Not Gene Simmons. What's his name?
Richard Simmons?
Yeah. But Gene Simmons is someone.
Gene Simmons is an actor from back in the day.
Oh, yeah. It's a female.
Gene?
Yeah.
Did you say Jean?
Yeah.
Gene, I think is the famous one.
Well, there's a famous Gene Simmons also, who was a female. She was like a actress in the late 1930s.
I don't think that's the Gene Simmons people are thinking of or knowing.
Maybe not.
G-E-
I don't know. She's in like a lot of like major classics, I guess.
Do Gene, the male Gene.
Yeah, it's the actor guy, isn't he? No, Gene Simmons. This is the guy in Fighter and the Kid from Kiss.
Oh, we're so young. So stupid.
Did
Yeah.
I say that?
No.
Who did I say?
Hey.
Roll back the tape.
Hey. How much coffee you had?
1 cup.
Because you are everywhere right now.
I know.
You don't even know what you said.
Well, because we also just threw 5 different Simmons out in the last 30 seconds. And in that time, I'm like, wait, how many Simmons do I know?
You said Gene Simmons, and I'm like, was he a former NFL player? And you're like, oh, I didn't know you said that. And I was like, wait, who's Gene Simmons? And you said, I don't know.
Well, because Gene Simmons, was talking about the Bitcoin thing on Fighter and the Kid. And like for some reason, when you told your thing, I didn't hear a football player. I just heard that he did a lot of his salary into Bitcoin. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, are you talking about him? Because he was talking about it with them. And then Gene Simmons, now you made me second guess, is that not who that was?
And then you said, no, it's the woman.
No. Okay. And you're like, no, that's because I thought when I said Gene Simmons, you knew that I was talking about him on Fire and the Kid. And you said, that's not Gene Simmons. And I was like, oh, maybe it's another name. Like maybe I just messed it up. And then I was like, but why is Gene Simmons a name in my head? Looked it up. It's a female. Okay, so maybe that's just why I know that name. Because there's another, it's Richard Simmons is the other one.
Oh, so you were second guessing that guy's name was Gene Simmons.
Correct. Yes.
The Kiss guy.
Yes.
No, it wasn't him.
Oh, okay.
It was a former NFL player. And apparently, like, people were kind of giving him shit about it at the time. I don't know how true that is. Like we've talked about before, athletes are always so sensitive to everything. They're against everybody's always against them somehow. But it's like worth $25 million now.
That's cool.
Because of where Bitcoin has got to.
That's cool.
Isn't that crazy? Like you wonder how much more that's going to happen, or people are going to try to do that.
The Bitcoin thing for me is it's everyone's excuse for it, but I have the same reasoning. It's like, if I don't understand it, it would be hard for me to put money into it. And the people that do understand it or take the time to understand it, it's like, great, you get the benefits then. Like,
yeah,
I don't want to take the time to learn about it.
Yeah.
And that could screw me in the future. Like maybe that's the next thing, but
anytime people are very cultish about stuff, I have a red flag. And that Bitcoin thing is that. It's like nobody is that crazy pushing about any other stock a lot of the time. It's like they're not like, you have to do this, or this is the future, or this is this. Whenever people get weird and cultish, I'm like, oh, there's something going on, something weird with this.
Yeah.
Because why are you so emotional about it?
I like old school stuff with that, because I think it's like what we said on the walk today. I think I question myself a lot, that with that stuff, I don't think if I was learning about Bitcoin, would I be able to spot the red flags to where the tried and true ways that have been tested and proven for decades, I'm like, okay, I probably don't have to like see the holes in this plan because it probably has worked its way out of that. Like people would have stopped investing this way if it wasn't the case, or if that was the case. That I just would rather do that and not have as many risks of me having to mess up with it.
Well, and I mean, we don't know enough about the Bitcoin thing of what's the longevity of it to where regular stock market investing or like S&P 500 or real estate or any of that sort of stuff. Like we've been able to see decades and decades of what happens and what it can do for your money and all that kind of stuff. That it's like, I would just rather go into those things than this like new adventure and thing that doesn't have a final path that's paved and figured out. And then again, people get so culty and weird with it. I'm like, what is going on? This is a new thing. Everybody's trying to jump on it. And then people are super emotional and culty about it. It's like, have fun. You go make your money that way. That's cool. Have a good time. But I'm going to stay away from it because it just seems so weird. Especially when you have so many like banks and businesses and like all of that sort of stuff that has it's so established in our country. Like you really think that they're just going to go quietly to this Bitcoin thing that's coming about with the people that are like, it's going to be our future currency and all that kind of stuff. Okay, but you don't think there's going to be a ton of fight for our current currency and how everything is attached to that? And like, this is going to take a very long time, I think, for it to pan out that way. And then you're talking about like, there's only a certain amount of Bitcoin anyways. So how, like, and this is where it goes into like, I just don't know enough about it,
right?
But using just like common sense, it's like, well, how would this end up working out? Somebody just ends up owning all the Bitcoin at one point, and then now we have a king ruling people, and like, well, where does this go? That's what I don't understand. And then you have all these businesses that are and our whole government is attached to this type of currency. You think they're just going to let Bitcoin come in and take over?
Sure.
Like, there's people making so much money off of it being the way that it is now. They're not going to they're going to pass regulations and do all this type of shit to make sure that it doesn't end up having an effect or a change.
Have you heard more about the Google?
No, and that was just like a random headline that I saw that they were maybe like it was starting to be considered like a monopoly and they were going to try to break it up. Like they're almost forcing them to sell off Chrome and
Comcast, right?
Comcast or something like that. Like all of the subsidiaries under Google, like they might have to sell pieces of them off because it's becoming too much of a monopoly, which that would be crazy, I think, because of how much Google has like their hands in everything and affecting everything, including YouTube. That like if they have to sell off all these pieces and whatever, all these companies become like individual entities, and now they can start to do things on their own and form on their own rather than being under the Google umbrella for whatever Google's, weird wants and desires seem to be as of lately.
Yeah.
You wonder if I don't know if that'll go through or if it has already or what the future will be with that, but that's kind of interesting or crazy that might end up Google might end up getting broken up.
I get why that is put into play because you don't want one thing to be too powerful, I guess, in very simplistic terms, but it's weird that there is a limit on success in this country that you could have.
Yeah, a little bit.
I mean, granted, you got pretty freaking far. Like that's how much more do you want? You control a lot of things in a lot of industries, but it is weird that there's a cap.
Yeah. Yeah, it is kind of weird, especially when it's like the whole idea of this country is you can build whatever you want and there is no limits. And then all of a sudden you get to a point that's like, well, actually there is.
Yeah.
Actually, we're going to say, no, you can't do that because that's crazy. But I think that's a good thing. That's what happened with the railroad companies. I think that's why the monopoly thing was kind of created, or it was those laws were put into place because of the railroads, I believe. One person owning all the
Oh.
railroads, and they were like, oh, you can now charge whatever you want, and you can basically do whatever you want because you control the entire market and the entire industry. That's what they talked about with kind of during COVID and that sort of thing, of all these people pushing for minimum wage to be raised. And I think it was Patrick Bet David that I heard talk about this initially or first. And he was like, this, you think about this in the terms of raising minimum wage would be so good for the people because you're making more money as the individual. But when you go to the business aspect of it, the mom and pop shops can't afford to pay you minimum wage. So the only people benefiting from this is Amazon, is Walmart, is Target, is all these giant companies and corporations, because they're the only ones that can afford to actually pay people more, to where you take your independent companies and mom and pop shops around town, they're not going to be able to afford to pay you $15 an hour by raising minimum wage. So you're actually going to kill a whole bunch of individual companies, and you're just propping up Amazon, Walmart, all these big companies even more. When people are talking about raising minimum wage, all the giant companies are happy about it because they know that they can afford it and they can do it. But none of these independent small businesses, small business owners, that sort of thing, they can't handle it. They can't do it. So then they're going to go out of business.
And I think you even see that on a smaller scale of just different versions of mom and pop, like what businesses are doing better, but they're still local. It's like, I would say even like working for several where it's like, oh, this one clearly just brings in more money, that we do get paid more there. And we do, like, there's more perks and more monetary benefits, to where the other one, it's not like you're working any less or doing any less, but just because they're bringing in less money, they're able to pay less. So it's like, it's not even on a grand scale of mom and pop versus Target, but like even small business to a little bit more medium business, how quickly you see those abilities jump.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like those people will win because people most likely will have to follow the money.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, if you're a person that you're working for somebody and they can't afford to pay you enough, like, you're going to have to probably move on at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a tough business model to continue to keep if you're the owner of it, of I can't pay my people more. So
because then you're probably going to get, and this isn't a judgment, but just through availability, you're probably going to get less equipped workers.
Totally.
Because you're also going to get people that are willing to work for less. And you're also getting people that are potentially, because they're willing to work for less, they're maybe younger and less able in a lot of the mature adult world jobs.
Yeah.
That you're just going to get less quality people most likely.
Yeah. 100%. That's exactly what happens.
So I have two topics that I want to talk about and bring up, and I think it's going to not be good ones.
Oh.
They're going to be...
It's going to be short? Like, not
No, not good ones. As in, like, I don't think people are going to like it. But I think it's very interesting. There's one of them is they're still doing studies, but they have done a decent amount of it so far that they're wanting to push and funding it more. I have not looked into who funds this, so be aware, I guess, of that. Like, I haven't dove deep into where are these studies being done, and if it's like they're only doing it in certain regions, because that would obviously affect things, I'm sure, a little bit. But it was a study where they were looking into the impact of obesity rates on both the mom and the dad, of when you are overweight with conceiving and when you're pregnant. There is and I got to look up it because it was 67% increase of risk of your kid having autism, obviously the diabetes and those related things, because you're probably going to have an obese child, just more of a lifestyle thing. But that they're seeing more connection to mental disorders, as far as autism being one of the major well-known ones. But as they're getting older, they're seeing a lot of different differences in test scores and like their mental capacity
Interesting.
with things. Like it's the behavior side of the mental stuff, but it's also just overall processing.
Yeah, like IQ and all that. This
Yeah.
general.
Which I think that's
brain
crazy
functioning.
that it's not just the mother, because you could say, okay, it's the mother because then what's she eating, and then that's going to the baby, and what's her ability to have certain activity levels because of her being overweight, all of that stuff. But I think it's interesting that it's the father too, because then that shows it's way more of the DNA genetic aspect of it.
Yeah, they're getting
Like
it from
that's
both sides.
transferring.
Yeah. Well, and I'd be curious to see if they're able to somewhat do a more controlled thing of like just one of the parents being obese versus one not. But even
Sure.
that, like that could be tricky to find because, again, the behavior or what's in the house, typically it's not one or the other. Like both are the same as the parents. But that's interesting that, so obese parents having children, there's a 60% increase of children having autism then?
67%. And it's not, because it's a newer study. I think the oldest that they have been able to test is like around 7, 8, like them
Okay.
getting to that. So you also take a 7-year-old, you're also going off of 7-year-old standards for like intelligence, I
Sure.
guess, which you still can do that. It's like we
You
still
can
test
make
kids for that.
comparisons
Yeah,
across
compared to
the
other
age group.
7-year-olds. But
Yeah. Well, that's something that, we're so freaked out about people being underweight when being pregnant and giving birth, but there's not a whole lot of consideration of overweight with that I think, the study showing it, and obviously, like you said, more and more that probably need to happen to show that this is also an issue and also a problem. But, what I always go back to is just the general common sense thing of like, you're unhealthy. That's just what it is. You're unhealthy, you're overweight, and now the genetic component is being transferred into your children. There's a whole lot of behavior component, I think, that comes into that too, of they're seeing what you eat, they're seeing how you live your life and do all that. And as they grow up, they're going to mimic that and do that because they're also a little bit forced to. They don't buy the groceries. They don't pick what they're eating all the time. So I think it's interesting that that's something that came up of the pregnancy thing, though, because people don't consider, it's always like, well, I'm eating for 2, put on a bunch of weight, I'm eating for 2. And it's like, well, no, you're not. You're eating for you and then a 6 to 9 pound kid. Like, you're not eating for 2.
you were eating for 2.
Yeah, you don't need to be. But we're so afraid of under eating. Like that is pushed way more with pregnant women of, you need to gain weight. Don't be skinny. Don't be small, because that'll be really dangerous.
Yeah.
To where,
Which in some instances, yes.
well, it's for sure. Like it for sure is a problem, but you're then completely negating the overweight side of it and how that could be a problem. And like, we were talking about this on a walk of, as long as the baby comes out and is living, it seems like people are okay. It was successful. To where they don't consider the complications during the pregnancy. They don't consider at 7 years old the complications that the kids might be having of whatever, autism or, IQ being lower, or even just like health-wise, genetically and health-wise, how are they doing across the board? Like, as long as the kid is alive, we're kind of satisfied and okay with it, to where that's such a horrible marker to go off of, because there's so much variance of, well, you're alive. Well, yeah, we're all alive, but some of us are much healthier and getting more, whatever it is that you're wanting to succeed at or whatever, but some of us are living a healthier life and whatever compared to others. But then when it comes to kids and pregnancies and children, it's like, as long as they're alive, like, there's so much that you can do to affect this positively. And we just have this kind of skewed perception, it seems like, of when it comes to pregnancy of, well, put on the weight, make sure you put on the weight. Don't skimp out. You're eating for 2. And then now a study comes out of 67% increase in autism from obese parents. It's like, that is crazy, crazy. And then you go to, okay, well, people are diagnosed more with autism now and other mental disorders. We're also more obese as a population. So it's not correlation equals causation, but
could be a piece for sure.
Could be a piece. Look at the things that are adding up. And it's like, that is something that's adding up for sure.
And I just looked up on like an insurance range, like a BMI calculator. So just to give like an idea. So I put in my information. So I did 5'5". I'm 5'5". I'm 125 pounds. To compute my BMI, it's 20.8. So normal weight for my size is between 18.5 and 24.9.
To add on?
Yeah. No, that's the number, I guess.
So that's the BMI. So
yes.
For your age or for your height?
For my height and my weight.
For your height and your weight, you want your BMI to be between 18 and what?
24.9.
24.9. That's quite a wide range.
Yeah. To
and
where
yours turned out to be right in the center at 20.
20.8, yeah. Which that's 21. Where it's tricky because it also doesn't give you like this is a trickier, I guess. You're not calculating what's muscle, what's fat, all that stuff. But I think to give a general, like, you can typically look at someone and go, you're overweight, or you're underweight, or you're fine. But
yeah, but we also have a skewed perception of it nowadays too, because BMI is not a great marker, but it is a marker to somewhat follow. And I think it's a very general one that if you're somewhat falling in the range that it's suggesting you should be, you're doing better than if you were not in the range. So, but we also have a skewed perception of it now because of the body positivity stuff and just the way that society has talked about it now. Of we kind of consider people overweight that are overweight to, oh, they're fine. And it's like, well, no, that's not what the data shows. That's not what the science shows. That's what our emotional feeling about it shows. But that's not what the data shows.
Well, I mean, okay, so I just put in this. Like, I changed it to 5'6", because I'm like, I feel like for a female, that's probably average. What do you think?
Probably.
5'6", 5'5", 5'6", 5'7", maybe. And I did like, what's the highest you can go before you are now overweight? And it's 155 pounds.
Before like the BMI scales or that?
But like if you are 155 pounds according to the BMI scale, which is not including muscle, but also, okay, take that also a little bit later. It's like 155 pounds is the cutoff. That's not like, I would think according to most people or women, they would say, oh, that's not bad.
Oh,
but
sure.
Like you can see that on someone. You add, I mean, however much that is added on to me. Like
that'd be 30 pounds for you.
Right. Yeah. To where according to like pregnancy standards, that could be in the potential of that's too much weight for me to need to gain.
Right.
It's like most people would say that's probably normal, or if you are that weight, like that would be okay. It's like, no, that already is overweight.
Yeah.
So it's like now you're putting risk on your health.
Add weight on top of that.
Right.
Yeah. We just have a skewed perception of what it's supposed to be, because we've gotten to this point emotionally as a society that we don't want to hurt people's feelings. And I get it, but that's where we get so out of touch, because now it's detrimental, where you're telling people that they're fine and everything's okay when really it's not, and then they're going to be suffering because of those consequences. And
that's where I go with the weight thing with females. It's so funky with females because we're so precious with our, like, we don't want to hurt your feelings because we value ourselves on our looks. I don't want to generalize, but I would say females probably, you would take the percentages, maybe more than 50% would value their looks over a lot of things, that we need to like be sacred and very careful with that and not hurt anybody's feelings. But then, you know, bringing up the studies of the kids, it's also just like the health factor of, okay, sure, you're overweight and you might look okay. Like you might like the way that you look. You might be able to function generally okay. But like also like, what's that doing to your heart? What's that doing to your brain chemistry? What's that doing to the blood flow and everything happening in your body?
Your
and
organs.
now, and yeah, in your organ, that now you're going to go and do the hardest, difficult, like the physical task of
birthing
a child, like developing a body inside your body.
Yeah.
It's like, that's already probably wild to begin with. Then let alone like you're doing that when your insides are not functioning at its best, because any excess weight, it's putting a stress on your body.
Yeah. You're having to deal with that and manage it. Your heart, your organs, your brain.
It's not a physical, like it's not a aesthetic.
Well, and I think that's where
your heart doesn't give a shit.
Yeah, and I think that's where people have the disconnect of, and it's the same thing with people like, you take Joe Rogan. He always says like, according to the BMI scale, I'm technically obese, but he's like, I have so much muscle, and that's what and it's like, yes, true, but just because you have muscle doesn't mean that your internal is not is functioning the way it should be. Like your frame is only supposed to hold this much weight, and your organs are only supposed to hold this much weight or deal with this much weight and deal with this sort of thing. So I think that's where I think BMI is, it's not the best scale. It's not, I don't even know if it's a good scale, but it's a average scale and general range that if you're outside of the ranges it's suggesting, that is worse than you being inside of the range that it's suggesting. So if you're supposed to be between whatever and whatever, according to the weight, like if you're supposed to be at 5'6", you're supposed to be between weights 115 and 135, and you're not in there, that is going to be detrimental for your health in the long term. But people have this disconnect of, they almost think about it physically of like, well, I can carry my weight around and I can still move good and I can still do this and I squat this much weight and whatever. But they're not considering the stress that's being taken on their brain, their organs, their heart.
It's like Mike was talking about on Chris Williamson. Like, he's like, physically, he looks insane. He looks awesome. Like, he is just dense with muscle. He's like, this isn't healthy for me.
Right. Dr. Mike Isertel.
Yeah. He's like, I am like pushing it beyond what is healthy. This is just like to look cool now.
Yeah. He's like,
and like, I like it. It's fun. But like, he's honest. He's like, I know I am potentially damaging my body, or I am potentially taking years off my life because of how I'm approaching this, but it's worth it to him. But like, he's not in this illusion or this delusion of, yeah, well, I look this way. I'm muscular. The more muscle, the better. Yeah.
No, because that's the other thing is like muscle is super expensive. It's expensive to maintain and to keep and to fuel that.
We're not saying don't go put muscle on, but
no, right. But it's like, it's not the more muscle, the better. And as all these bodybuilders would live to 115 then, if that was the case. But a lot of them die early. Granted, a lot of them are on a bunch of steroids and all that kind of stuff, which doesn't help. But it's not like your frame that you are so blessed with, you have to manage. And if you're going for the longevity approach of life, I think that's typically where we come from. We can get into nitty-gritty arguments about, you know, a whole bunch of other stuff, but typically what we are talking about is the longevity aspect and just like the quality of life as you're living.
And that to me would be longevity. It's not how long can I live? It's what was my quality of life during that, and as long of quality of life that I could have.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where this pregnancy conversation comes in, is like the quality of life and going through that process. It's not that, along with all the other stuff. It's just not being talked about in a more data science approach. It's being talked about in a emotional, we don't want to hurt people's feelings approach. And when has that ever helped anybody? Honestly, like, raise kids, teach kids. If you're constantly pitter pattering around their emotions, like, you're not going to get anywhere. And then they're going to become snowflake kids that can't handle anything. Well, guess what's happened to our society? Snowflake society that can't handle anything, can't handle the hard truth anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So it ends here.
Yeah. Yeah. When I saw that study pop up and then I read more, I'm like, okay.
Well, and
because it's so much more beyond the, it's so much more beyond, because to me, like, the father thing, adding that into the mix is so interesting because it's so much more beyond the obvious day-to-day lack that you have of when it's the mother. It's like, yeah, well, you're not going to move around as much when you're pregnant. Yeah, you're not going to be able to bounce back. And I don't mean bounce back in the, again, the physical looks department of that, but like to be able to move with your kids, be able to function with them better, to be able to handle your health so that you can be healthier for them in your daily activities once you do have the kid. The birthing process of that, like if you have complications, that's not, the complications aren't random.
Well, and that was something that
but then the kids, like, it's the dad's stuff too. It's like, it is now so much deeper than just your daily what you're giving the kid. It's like, no, it's affecting their genetics now. Mm-hmm. I mean, now it always has, but like we're studying it now.
Well, and you're seeing the effect of that more so because of the problems that we are seeing more and more with autism and, you know, all of that kind of stuff, ADHD, anxiety. It's like, how much of that is correlated to anxiety too. It's hard to meet people that are really active, eat really well, sleep really well, that have a whole lot of anxiety.
Yeah.
They're hard to find. We were talking about that on the walk too, of like, I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure that my mom had 5 kids, like natural births. Who's even having 2 kids without a C-section now?
Or like health complications.
Or health complications, or like needing to get in vitro or some sort of help with that. It's like, yeah, that just wasn't a thing.
Yeah. And that's not even like an age thing anymore. It's like, we have people our age that are having that problem.
Right. Yeah. And again, nobody addresses it back to health. Nobody addresses it to, well, what's your exercise like? What's your diet like? How's your sleep? And it's just like, well, yeah, it just happens sometimes. Really? That's what we're going to go with? Like, that's where I'm like, that's not acceptable to me. That's not an acceptable answer or reason. There's nothing in this world that just like, well, stuff just happens. It's like, no, why are some people able to do this naturally and it's fine and other people are not? And we're not trying to figure out why this is the case. Or the autism thing. We're not trying to figure out why more kids are getting autism or having autism versus not. More ADHD versus not. We're not trying to figure that out. We're just going, yeah, it just happens. What are you talking about?
And I get it. It's more socially acceptable now. So people are talking about it more and there's more testing to do with it. Like, all of that is still correct. Yes. Maybe way back in the day, they didn't even know that was a thing. And they're just like, your kid's crazy. It has more energy. I don't know. And like, can't focus. Okay. But still.
Yeah. Well, there's
it's like, that doesn't mean, oh, well, we're just testing it more. So it's just, we're noticing it. It's like, no, that means like there is a problem and there is a wiring issue in our kids' brains that is happening. I don't care if it's more frequent or less frequent. It's happening. That's not a typical function of the human body. Is there a chance that we are affecting that?
Well,
versus like, it's just, you're unlucky.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, this is affecting our children's lives, which then affects society. It's like, do we want to think about it at all? Like, you want to have sympathy and compassion for these kids. Are we the one doing the damage to them?
Yeah, and I would say 100%. 100% we are. Because it wasn't happening as much.
Well, and sure, but let's say when people say, well, no, it was happening, we just weren't testing it. Like, okay, but it's happening. That's all that matters. Whether happening more or less, it's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they've also changed the standards of what they're looking for and changing too, which puts more people into that category.
Yes.
Which then you're also able to sell more pills to people.
Yes.
And also have all these different programs and structures that people have to pay for to go into it. So it's like, this is where people don't think down the line, which drives me nuts. Is it's like, well, we're testing for it more now. Yeah. And that's not suspicious at all to you.
Right.
Like, what are you talking about?
And again, like, look at what they test for now compared to 10 years ago to compared to 20 years ago. Like, they have changed the standards. They have changed what they look like, what they're looking for. Even look at the list of what is developmentally what your kid is supposed to be at 6 months or a full year or 18 months. That has changed because they're noticing kids aren't meeting those markers. So instead of, hey, why aren't these kids meeting these markers? We're going, well, we don't want to make the parents feel bad. So let's either just move it farther down or let's just take it off the list. Like in some countries, they took off crawling as part of a developmental standard. It's like, okay, why? Why are kids not crawling? Why are we not like noticing that there's a disconnect here? Crawling is a huge connection to being able to have like reading and being able to comprehend stuff, learning languages, like like the ability to do cross brain connections between left and right. Like that starts with crawling because you're doing opposite motions. So it's like, okay, yeah, they don't crawl. Maybe who cares? Like, no, it really matters.
Yeah.
And now when we have thousands of kids that are not crawling or they're crawling a year later or 6 months later, like any parent would know, a couple months that's a different kid. 6 months, that's a different kid. Now you're having them take a developmental thing that's supposed to happen at a year or 6 to 8 months. And now you're going, it's okay if they get to that by 2 years old. What else is being delayed? What else is not happening within those periods of, well, it should have went from crawling to scooting on their knees to like then walking, being able to stand and balance. Like, how is all of that affecting their physical abilities, which is affecting their brain? And we're just going, well, but we don't want to make them feel bad.
Yes.
Not like, hey, why are not all 6 months like, why are they not crawling?
Yeah.
Why isn't their brain wanting them to do that?
Yeah. And it happens in the adult space too. Like we move the goalposts and the standards of what's overweight, what's underweight, all that kind of stuff, because we just are trying to have people feel good about themselves rather than being told, hey, this is actually not going to be good for your health. Your blood pressure is higher. Your A1C is high. All this stuff is, your cholesterol is really high. All these things are bad markers. Instead of going like, you're going to need to change some stuff if you want to live a quality filled long life. We go like, well, let's just move it so that they're in that range now. And then prescribe them a pill. And everything's fine. Like, you're good, actually.
Yeah.
It's like, it's crazy.
How tall are you?
5'10".
How much do you weigh?
3/4. Huh?
How much do you weigh?
166. Pretty much every day of my life.
You're 23.8. So you are... like you are almost at the higher end of normal weight. Isn't that crazy?
The higher end of normal weight?
Like you're 20, I mean, higher end, well, considering the low end is 18.5. You're 23.8 and the cutoff is 24.9.
So I got still like another one. So what is the
next category? But like you're not like in the middle or low. Like looking at you, I'd be like, yeah, you're skinnier.
Yeah.
You're lighter.
Like, what's the next category up? What is it?
Overweight is 25.
Overweight is 25. So put in if I was 180 pounds. 5'10", 180 pounds.
You are overweight. 25.8.
Isn't that crazy? I weighed 195 at one point. Okay, and most like junior, senior year of high school, I was 180.
Yeah, you would be on the higher end of overweight. That would put you at 195. That would put you at 28, and the cutoff of overweight to obese is 29.9.
Isn't that crazy?
It's like you looked great, but you also, what gut issues did you have?
Yeah, my heart was hurting.
Oh, your joints were probably trash.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a really bad perspective of what's overweight and not. Like you said, like I am a point. Go to do like 175. Say if I added 10 more pounds.
You'd be overweight.
Overweight. So if I added 10 more pounds, I would be considered overweight according to the BMI scale.
Yeah.
Which, that's what's funny is, do you know, did you look up, I should look this up, of what the insurance people follow for that? Is it the same as the BMI? Did you hear?
Well, that's what I'm on, is like an insurance, like what they go off of, but I don't know what rates change.
So here's what's crazy with the insurance people is when they're doing like health insurance and life insurance and that sort of stuff, they are extremely accurate at predicting when you'll die. Like,
because their business depends on it.
Because their business depends on it.
They don't want to pay you.
So accurate. You'd hear like Peter Attia talk about this. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And that's why we always talk about, like, if you're 70 and you have a broken hip, you basically have 5 years according to the data. And these insurance companies know this. Like, they're fucking crazy how accurate they are. If they're following that scale and they see that you're overweight, they have a very good idea of when you're going to die, and it's going to be earlier than if you're in the normal range of that scale.
Yes.
And
I mean, even on their website, they're like, if you're even in the overweight category, these are the problems you're going to have.
Yeah, and they are probably like, spot on.
You're overweight, which if you just look at someone, most of our culture would probably say, that's a healthy person.
Well, what did we talk about the other day?
Heart, your kidneys, like everything just starts to...
It's over 50% of our population's overweight.
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
It was...
I mean,
gosh, I already forgot
way more than that.
Forgot that's percentage. 68 or something like that.
Should I say how much of the U.S. is overweight?
Yeah.
70%.
70%.
Nearly 70%.
And I think it was like
according to the CDC. So I guess...
I think it was like 35% was obese or something. So 70% of people are in that overweight category. These insurance companies know when you're going to die. They are pricing their whatever you call them, claims or whatever, off of you.
So like, this about 74% of adults in the U.S. are overweight, and nearly 43% of that are considered obese.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And these I can't understate it or overstate it enough. These insurance companies, they know when you're going to die. They know. So when they are making your claims, they're knowing when you're going to die. So they're able to like, I don't even know what I'm trying to say. They are the ones that we should be going to of like, what should we be doing? Because
sure.
They know so specifically when you're going to die that if they're only giving you claims to when you're 60 or 70 or something like that, like they know. Mm-hmm. They know what's going on. And we don't want to follow that. We want to go, well, let's just move the goalpost and say, hey, actually you're healthy at this BMI. What the BMI says of you being overweight, you're actually healthy and you're fine. You'll be fine. You'll live a long, healthy life. Well, these insurance companies are betting against that. They're going, no, you're actually going to die 5 to 10 years earlier. Mm-hmm. And this is what we're building our insurance claim around you for. Like, they know. They have all this data. Like you said, their jobs, their business depends on it. They know what's going on. Like, you need to listen to them, not these fucking doctors and these other health people that are like, oh, you're fine. If you're BMI and you're overweight, don't worry about it. That's not even that accurate. You're fine. Well, these fucking insurance companies follow that, and they are spot on all the time.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's where you also have to, like, take your health into your own hands a little bit, because if you do, if you go to the doctors and they're just doing like the general they're doing like averages basically. So if you go and get a physical, or, you know, the last time I went to like the gynecologist or something, they're just giving you based off of your age. So it's like, everything looks good for your age. So like my doctor specifically told me, like, cause I was like, what does this mean? Like, what do you categorizing this for? Like, what are you looking at for the metrics basically? And he told me, he's like, for your general age group, this is what we are seeing. This is why we are seeing it. It's like, we are seeing people your age on a shit ton of medication. They're coming in. Everyone is on the pill or on birth control. Mm-hmm. So if you are not on those things, you're crushing it. Basically, he's like, the scale is so low that it's not even like you're going off of like my actual physical ability or numbers or what you're seeing. You're just going, compared to other people your age, you're doing good. But when the other people my age are doing terrible, mm-hmm. I'm just doing I'm doing better than terrible.
Exactly. Well, that's what I was going to say with
and they did it with like your blood pressure too. It's like, that scale is so wild. Like, you need to know more. So like, give me my exact numbers and then I'll decide if that's good or not. Yeah,
exactly. Like, I will go look at the actual data of what it's supposed to be, because they're also seeing so many people. They're creating their own average of what they see. So then when somebody comes in and it's a little bit better, they go, hey, you're actually doing pretty good, because they're comparing it to the rest of the people that they see that's way worse, but you're still 20 pounds overweight.
Yeah.
But you're doing a little bit better than all the people that are 40 and 50 pounds overweight and having high blood pressure, high A1C, organs aren't working, you know, brain fog, all that kind of stuff. Like, that's where it is. You have to take it into your own hands, and you have to compare it to what is the best possible scenario, not what the rest of the society is doing or country is doing, because 74% of people are overweight. You're comparing yourself to not great standards. This is what happens like in sports all the time. If you're they literally for college football, they do a playoffs now, and they used to not do a playoffs, but one of the criterias was strength of schedule. Did you play against people that are good, or did you play against people that were bad? And that's going to factor into where you rank. Because if you're playing a bunch of shit teams and winning, well, what about this other team that's played a whole bunch of good teams and they've only lost one or two games? They've played way better competition. Right now, where we're at in a society is we're comparing against a whole bunch of not great scenarios and situations. So when we're just a little bit better, like you said, well, we're comparing it to a bad strength of schedule. We're comparing it to a bad situation that we're in. To where you need to compare it to the best of the best. Like, what is the healthiest population? That's where we should be comparing it to and looking at and seeing, okay, these people live to 115. Quality of life is through the roof. What do they eat? How do they sleep? What are the conditions they sleep in? What are they eating? But also, where is that food coming from? Is it sprayed with a bunch of stuff? Is it fresh caught? Is it farm raised? Is it what's going on? What is their exercise routine? What does that look like? What do most of the people do? How is their communication and relationships with people? What do they do into their older ages? But instead, we just go with this other situation scenario, and now we're 74% overweight in the country.
Yeah.
But you're actually not overweight. Everything's fine. Everything's good. And our fucking, whatever you call it, our age, how long people live, is going down.
Even with all the medical advancements that we should have.
Yes. And everybody's like, but we have medicine. Yeah. And it's starting to go down now.
Well, that's one thing I even forgot to say with the doctor's appointment that I had, because it was like a good chunk of time in between my two appointments, because it probably would have been like 4 years actually, because I don't live by my doctor, and it was during COVID. I just didn't go, and I stopped being on birth control. So I just like, well, I don't need to go. I don't need to get anything from you anymore. So I don't need to see you. But I wanted to go in just to make sure everything was fine and start having those conversations about like in the next few years, like I want to get pregnant. What could I be doing now, few years out, to start prepping myself for that? And one of the things that he did say, because he was looking at my charts after which the nurse was hyping me up about it, because she had my records from last time, and from a 4 year, I don't know exactly, but 4 year difference, I was the same weight.
Oh.
Which you're in this, like, it's not like, okay, I'm comparing my 20-year-old self to 50. It's like, yeah, your body's going to start to be different somewhat because there might be a hormonal shift. You might be going through menopause, so that also changes. Like that, there's more obvious things, but like nothing should change from 23 to 26 or from 20 to 30. Nothing should change. And that's something my doctor brought up was the fact that I was the same weight and like my numbers looked similar to when they were last time. He's like, that's what you want. Like you want to be able to maintain what you have. It's not this is the average or this is like a healthy thing. It's like, what is your healthy?
Mm-hmm.
It's like if you are, your youth is probably where you're going to have the most health. So if you can continue to like get to that or to stay at that, you're probably going to be pretty good. So I forgot to say that, but that was one thing that he brought up was like the fact that your weight is the same 4 or 5 years later means like you're maintaining something. And I wasn't taking birth control at that point, so I'm on less medication.
Mm-hmm.
Or that was the only medication I was on. But
well, think about the stress that your body goes through from gaining weight, losing weight.
yeah,
Like just that alone and
yeah.
how much it can change the way your body's functioning. Your body has become extremely efficient at what it does because it's been able to keep the same weight and keep the same consistency for 4 years and, you know, hopefully longer and longer and longer. Your body just it's not having so much other stress on it
Mm-hmm.
when you're trying to change weight all the time or
Mm-hmm.
all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Which I don't know if my doctor was just like boosting my ego, but he is also a healthier looking individual. Like it seems like every time I've gone in to see him, it's like it gets back to workout conversations and health conversations that it seems like he is somewhat focused on that for him to be like, you'd be surprised how many women come in your age or younger. It's like, you're going to have a hard time having kids.
Yeah.
Just for the amount of stress that their body is under, the amount, like the things that he sees coming up in females it's happening younger and younger because I don't know if we're getting on medication younger or whatever it is, but he's like, that's sad.
Yeah.
Like I'm used to seeing people and helping them in the best parts of their life of having kids. And it's like, that's happening. Like there's problems.
Yeah, it's not a fun, joyous thing. People are stressed about it, worried about it because things are happening that are not good. And
Yeah.
it's difficult to have kids and their bodies don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And even if they are able to, it's a bumpy ride to get to there. And then you're going to have to make choices and sacrifices that maybe you don't want to have to make. And yeah.
But yeah, he said you'd be surprised. I'm like, I don't think I'd be surprised.
Yeah, no. I mean, we hear about it all the time now.
Yeah.
It's common, which sucks.
Yeah.
But again, I think it's because of this lack of honesty that surrounds the conversation and the topic. It's just not that people are just not honest about it. They're just trying not to hurt people's feelings.
Yeah.
And then now people can't have kids because of that.
Yeah. And that's what, like, it just makes me so sad. That is what makes me sad about it. It's like, yes, you're putting yourself in the situation and the education is not there. And you're also hearing from your doctors, like,
Exactly.
You're fine. You're healthy.
Exactly.
Like, we're not bringing up that you're overweight and, like, you should do something about that. And what can we do to support that? Granted, you're going to most general doctors. Like, they don't have the education to do that. Even maybe illegally be able to do that. I don't know. But it's something that should be just like what's the word I'm looking for? Like a milestone in your life that you should be able to get to do have kids, and like something that you should just be born with the ability to have that and have that, you know.
There should be a part of life that's not really that thought of, like,
That
has
there
to have
shouldn't
that
be
many
that
struggles.
much. Yeah.
Yeah. There's already
Yeah.
enough struggles.
Yeah.
You already have to carry a kid for 9-10 months and deal with all of that and go through the most pain in your life of birthing a kid and then raising the kid and how difficult that is. You already have to go through all of that, and now adding on top of it, the conversations aren't honest about, you're overweight, this is going to be difficult for you, you're probably going to have complications during your pregnancy,
which then limits people from being able to have as many as they want, or
right.
even any at all, which
Yep.
makes me so sad for people.
Yeah, that's the saddest scenario.
Yeah.